everybody, and welcome to another Small Batch Publishers live chat. Tonight we are speaking with Jeff Warrender about the stages of game design. So we are live on Facebook on Small Furry Games. We are live on the Small Batch Game Publishers group, and we're live on the Small Furry Games Facebook channel. So welcome to everybody who is watching. If you haven't checked out the Facebook group for the Small Batch Game Publishers, you can do that. We accept just about anybody. Just answer the one question for membership. And we're connecting there to talk about ways for small and indie game publishers to get their games out into the world in ways that are more simple and sustainable, and in ways that we can be a little more nimble and maybe try some new things that wouldn't make sense if we were publishing thousands and thousands of games, but would make sense if we're just getting out a few hundred or a few dozen in some cases. So you can check that out there. Today, our guest is Jeff Warrender. Jeff is a tabletop game designer from upstate New York. His first published game, The Sands of Time, was released by Spielworks in 2018, and his latest game, The Axe of the Evangelist, will be released in 2022 under his own label, Belltower Games. So he's got sort of the signing a game and a publishing game experience. His day job, he's a physicist, which is really interesting. And in 2020, he published a book called You Said This Would Be Fun, a book about game design that draws on lessons that he has learned from his experiences. So today we're going to talk a little bit about sort of a crossover philosophy that Jeff has been thinking about recently about in technology and in manufacturing and these other industries. We think about products as having to hit certain milestones as they prepare to be launched and sort of birthed into the world. And how do we apply that into game design and think about from the time a game becomes just sort of a vague idea to getting it to the table, to maybe pitching it to a publisher or deciding to self-publish and eventually manufacturing that and getting out to the world. So a few people have left comments and questions ahead of time, but feel free to leave them during the live stream and we will try to answer them. Let's take a look. Just getting a message from Jeff. He might be having a little bit of technical problems, but we'll try to pop him in and see how this works. So I'll go ahead and add you to the screen. Okay, got a thumbs up. So everybody, welcome Jeff Warrender. Hey, Jeff.
Hey, Emily, how's it going? Success on the technology
Yes,
side. We're good.
Success. We are using StreamYard, which is a little bit new to me. It is an online platform, so sometimes it takes a little while to get everything up and to get it back out to you. So sometimes there's a little bit of an audio glitch and things like that, but it's user-friendly and it's what I know, so it's what we use. So everybody's favorite question, Jeff, why don't you go ahead and tell us about yourself?
Yeah, this is actually probably the hardest question of the bunch. I'm not a very interesting person, but yeah, my name is Jeff Warrender. I do live in upstate New York, have for most of my life. Yeah, and so I have two college-age daughters, which is weird, and a son who's 12. My wife and I are high school sweethearts, so we've been married for almost 24 years now, and both from upstate. And yeah, so kind of in the early 2000s or so, I got bit by the game design bug, and you know, I mean, you guys know how it is when it bites you, it bites pretty deep. So have never been able to shake it loose after all these years, but it's been a fun ride. You know, gotten to know a lot of fun people, and worked on some fun games with fun people, and yeah, it's been really a fun adventure. So.
Cool. So tell us a little bit about Belltower Games. When did you go from sort of dabbling in game design to saying, I want to have sort of a name behind it and I want to have a particular type of game? Or
yeah, so I think it was about 2011 or so. I thought I might start a company, really not to do my own stuff, but more to publish other people's stuff. It didn't work out for a few reasons. And then in the last year or so, there was the container shipping thing. And I think we were all sort of starting to take stock. I mean, this group, I'm preaching to the choir here, but we're all starting to take stock of the overall trends in our industry, and seeing that there's, you know, the Kickstarter thing and the China thing and the freight thing and all these different things. It's, you know, I've been working all these years to get a game or games published by publishers, and I don't know if I entirely agree with all of their practices. And so it seemed like a good opportunity to just take a swing at putting something out into the world in a different way that I would be happy with. And I knew it wasn't going to be a a big seller. I didn't want it to be, because I was trying to do things in this small batch way. But yeah, that was kind of the big leap was late last year. I said, but what the heck, I'm going for it. And so
Go
here we
for
are.
it.
Yeah.
So tell us a little about your game. So you have a game. So Sands of Time was released in 2018, and then
Yep.
Acts of the Evangelist is this year. It is out or it's coming out.
It is out. Yeah, I think my bio, I might have fed you some out of date information, but yeah, it's out now.
Excuse
It
me.
looks like this. It's pretty well. Oh,
Oh.
oh, you can't see it because
It
of the
looks like a brick
background.
wall.
Whatever. Take my word for it. It looks really great. It's a great game. Yeah. So I've been, it's been a kind of a weird ride. Like Sands of Time is a civilization building game. For me, games are something are sort of like essays and sort of like challenges. Like what motivated my game Sands of Time was there was a game called Mare Nostrum that came out in 02, 03. And when I heard about it, it was like Civ Light was not a thing. There was just Francis Tresham's all day civilization, and that was it. And
Right.
so I read about this game, Mare Nostrum, and I was like, I know what I'm doing. I want to try this Civ Light thing. And then, in the years since, there's been a lot of other stuff in that subgenre that's come out. Um, but it was a lot of fun. I think um, as I've progressed as a designer, I think I'm getting further along towards actually having a design philosophy, and writing my book, which I think is the next question, has really helped clarify kind of what is it I'm trying to accomplish. And I guess I've come to realize that the games that I really like are really embodied by the German games school of the 90s and OOs or whatever, the games like
Mm-hmm.
Tikal and Carcassonne and all these games with very simple rule sets, a lot of elegance, um, a lot of player interaction. I really like playing those games. I was never very good at designing them, but I'm trying to get better at that. So it's been a fun challenge to
Yeah, that's a
move in that
great
direction.
sort of genre there. I like that genre because it does offer kind of that depth and that, like you said, that elegance. They're accessible and sort of approachable to new players, but they're also games that surprisingly kids really like and really
Oh
grasp
yeah,
onto. It kind of falls under that, like, kids can understand it, but it's not a kids game that's marketed to kids. That it's
exactly.
marketed to everybody. It's kind of a
Yeah.
nice sweet spot, or sort of an aspirational spot to design towards. So you mentioned your book. You said this would be fun. Tell us a little bit more about that book, and yeah, how we can find out more about it and what's in it.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a very opinionated book, I should say. But this is a book I wrote in the late 2019. What happened was after I published, and it looks like that. After I published Sands of Time with Spielwerks in 2018, it was kind of I was between projects, and it was like, well, maybe I'll start blogging a little more. I've learned a lot I've worked on Sans for 15 years, and I feel like I learned some things. I'll just write some blog posts, and that was a lot of fun. And um, as I started to write more and more, so my personality type is INTJ. That's the mastermind, which is not to say
Mm-hmm.
that, we're necessarily smart, but it's more to say that we think of things in a
Very.
structural and systematic way.
Mm-hmm.
And so the thought was, hey, if I take these blog posts, there are some threads that are running through these that look like a book. And the idea is that game design is supposed to be player centered as opposed to designer centered. And and player centered game design has really three elements to it, I argue: engagement, motivation, and challenge. So we're trying to draw players in with whatever the things are that draw players in, and we're trying to motivate them with good scoring rules that will help them lean into the contest. And then we want to challenge them. We want to have to make them stretch themselves to achieve victory. So the book basically goes into a lot of detail and a lot of opinions about those three ideas of game design. And as it happens, we are just kicking off in about a week and a half a book club. We have a Discord server for that. So everyone here is welcome to join. You don't have to have read the book. You don't have to read the book to join the group.
The
But
Cliff Notes Club.
Yeah. So yeah, but everyone's very welcome to join. Should be a really fun time. Just walking through it, one chapter every 2 weeks. Very leisurely pace, very approachable.
Very cool.
Yeah,
So before we go right into sort of like what are the 9 stages
yeah.
of let's just back up a little bit and just talk about so we've started this group called Small Batch Game Publishers that is focused on doing things a little bit differently, right? And so that even within that, people are doing things differently. We talked to Brian last time, I believe, about publishing like micro batches of games. We talked to Chris about using Etsy and at fairs and things like that. So what is sort of your goal or your mission or your business model, I guess, of publishing games right now? What does that look like
Hmm.
for you? What are you doing with game publishing?
So yeah, so Belltower, the two main things I wanted to really emphasize, and I'm not sure how much of a selling point these have been, is nothing from China. And the Chinese people are wonderful, but geopolitically, there are issues with China that we have to be worried about a little bit, or maybe a lot. And so let's try and see what we can do domestically. And the second was no delayed gratification. And no disrespect to people who use Kickstarters, but it was just for me. I wanted to be able to say, this game's ready to buy. I'm going to ship it out to you in a day if you order it. And that was
Hmm.
important, both because I just wanted to be able to do that, and second because I knew I was going to make mistakes in the process, and I didn't want to be on camera with other people's money while I was making
Right.
those
Update us,
mistakes.
update us, update
Right.
us.
I wanted
What's
to be
going
able to
on?
screw everything up as much as I needed to get this job done, and then you just see the end product of it.
Yeah.
Um,
And
so I
that
knew
is something I think
yeah,
we forget about sometimes in the game design world with talking on BGDL or these other places. Everybody's doing Kickstarter and we support Kickstarters. I'm used to backing something and then I get it like 12 or 18 months later, but the general public doesn't always think that way. And so yeah, that's an interesting thing to think about, is like, who is your target market and are they willing to have that delayed gratification, or do they want it right away? So
yeah.
you sort of upfronted the money to, did you do pre-orders or did you kind of upfront the money to print a certain number of copies yourself, and how did you go about doing that?
Yeah, I probably should have done a pre-order type thing, but yeah, I basically paid for the print run up front. I'm not an artist or designer, so I had to hire in those services, bought all the bits, assembled them, and I figured I could probably handle a throughput of 100 to 150 copies without taking up too much space in my house, which was mostly true. And I thought the game I picked could sell about that many, which is probably also mostly true. We sold about 100 copies, coming up on
That's good.
130 is the goal. So that's about what I wanted to achieve to break even. I didn't price it in a way to make money, mostly because everything ended up so expensive that it would have, as it is, it's a little pricier than what I wanted. So there's a lot that I've learned in the process, but yeah, the idea was entirely to sort of balance what I thought the demand would be with the amount that I could probably handle myself. Because you run a
Yeah.
Kickstarter and it's like, oh, it's a big success. I sold 3,000 games. Now I have to find a way to manufacture 3,000 games, and that would have meant for me doing
Mm-hmm.
stuff that wasn't what I wanted to do. So just kind of
Yeah,
this
that is
gave me
something to think
the
about.
control I wanted. Yeah,
Yeah, because some people think, oh, great, if I sell 10,000 games, but oh, what are you going to do when you get all those orders? And
yeah,
and you can do that on Kickstarter. You can set a cap and say, I have 100 games available.
right.
You know, that's all I'm selling.
Yep.
So that's an interesting approach too. Okay, so yeah, let's jump into this idea of readiness and the 9 stages of readiness. Where did this come from, and how did it sort of shift over to game design for you? And maybe give us a little overview of what those 9 stages are, and then we can. And again, people who are watching as we're going through the 9 stages, pop up your questions, and we can make this a conversation too, not just
Yeah.
a
Oh, absolutely.
lecture necessarily.
Yes. No, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, the of all of my uh many thoughts about game design. The most mature thoughts are all in the book, and this is right on the bleeding edge of stuff I've thought about. So yeah, everybody please chime in with reflections and reactions and stuff. But the idea was that in the as you said, I'm a physicist by day. In the technology world, there's a concept called technology readiness level, and this is a metric that everyone uses to state the maturity of your technology. And it's a scale that goes from 1 to 9, where 1 is we've observed some basic principles, we've made some observations, we don't really understand what this is or what it's useful for yet. So really, really raw stuff. And then all the way up to 9 is we've flown many successful missions of this thing, which it's originally a NASA concept. But the idea is 9,
Okay.
it's not just we launched it into the world. 9 is this is a mature, proven technology. It works and has demonstrated that it works time and time again. And then in between is all the stuff that leads up to that. This is useful for a couple of reasons. The first is that it gives everyone a common vocabulary to talk about technology maturity. If I talk to someone who's a government funding agency or someone in a university or someone who's an angel investor, and I say, my technology's at TRL 3, they will know, even if they don't know anything about my technology, they know something about my technology just by me saying that. And what they specifically
Okay.
know is the next part, what it's ready for. That's the readiness part. So knowing the maturity of the technology helps me to know what's coming next. What kind of resources and support do I need to mature to the next level? And that's why we're having this conversation, government agency, representative person, I'm at TRL 3. I need your help to get to TRL 4. I need some
Gotcha.
money for testing, or I need, hey, university professor, I need some test articles to run this test on this new material. Can you help me out? So that's what TRL does for these conversations. It gives us a shared framework that we can all be on the same page for. So I
Yeah,
thought,
it
what
sounds like it gives a pathway also to look forward to. I see a
it
lot of
does,
people,
yeah,
and I do it too. When you're working on game design, you're like, well, it works. What do I do next? Like, should I do art the next? Should I write the rule book? Should I test it? What should I do? And a lot of people do that in wobbly, wavy, whatever the pathway takes them, or
sure,
however they're inspired to. I play tested games that have amazing art on them, and it's obvious the game is not ready. And I've play tested some really great games that don't have art yet. So there, we don't have, like you said, having that common language is interesting in an industry. We don't have that, I don't think, in board games.
certainly not.
So it's interesting to think of it that way and to have a conversation with somebody and say, what stage is this in? How much have you play test? And sometimes it says, how many times have you play tested this? Right? Oh, I've play tested 100 times. So what does that actually mean? Is it
Right,
working, or you've play tested 100 times? Because sometimes it can work
right.
after 20 play tests. So yeah, so tell us, what are the 9? What are the 9 sort of steps in your mind?
Yeah, so we can break them down into 3 groups. The first 3 are exploratory. So the first is I have some idea. I want to make a game about bagels or whatever. The second is I've reduced that to practice in some way. There's some set of mechanics. Maybe it's not a complete game, but I've at least figured out how to gamify this idea. And then the third thing is I maybe have a
Right.
rough prototype, maybe not of the whole game, maybe just of some subsystem of the game, but I have something that I can play. I can put it on the table. It probably doesn't work. It probably blows up, but at least it's a playable version of this idea I had. So we might call that an alpha prototype or an alpha play test, or solo play testing happens in this phase for some people. So this is exploration. Is there something here? The next 3 steps are what I would call implementation. We've committed to making this a game, and we're going to make it a good game. So level 4 is I have a working prototype. I have a working rule set. It's complete. I can play the game. It plays to completion, and now we're play testing this with real people, and and trying to find what's there, what's good about this game. Step 5 is sort of a refinement step where we are trying to fix balance issues. We're trying to, maximize fun, minimize unfun game states, all that kind of thing. We're trying to make the game better and better. And this is, this is maybe a stage where some blind play testing is starting to happen for some people, but this is really much more focused play testing. And then stage 6 is now we're starting to think about transitioning this to a product. So I'm writing a really good rule set, not just a not just a Google Doc or something like that, but an actual, designed rule set that I can hand to someone. And I'm worrying a lot more about the user interface, the graphic design. Not to say I'm necessarily hiring a pro at this point, but I'm at least improving the functionality of the game itself. And then the last three steps are what I would call the product realization stage. And that doesn't have to mean like a Kickstarter or a sellable game. It can mean a free print and play or a giveaway, whatever. Not everything has to be sold for money. But in stage 7, I'm now doing formal graphic design and production representative prototype articles, maybe through the Game Crafter or whatever. I'm getting a game that looks like the real thing made. Step 8, it's published, it's out in the world, people can buy it or download it or whatever, they can play it for themselves. And then 9 harkens back to this many successful missions. 9 is, this is a successful game, people like it, it was well received, it's a good game, people think it's good. And so if we think of it in terms of readiness level, kind of we can say at each step what's it ready for next. So if we said, oh, this is at TRL 3, it's a rough prototype, well, that means it's ready for an actual more complete rule set, more complete prototype. And if we get to 9, we say, what's it ready for? Well, it's ready for a reprint, or it's ready to be
Reprint,
picked
yeah.
up by another publisher because it's a success. So that's kind of how I think about these. It's not just necessarily steps in a process, but gates that you have to get through en route
Gates, yeah.
to this platonic end state of a great game that everyone wants to play.
Nice. My
Yeah.
favorite thing that you said was minimizing the unfun.
Yeah, that's not the
That's such an important thing when you're
yeah,
playtesting something like that is not fun. How
yeah,
can we make that fun or get rid of it?
yeah. You're
That's
right,
so
and
cool.
and
So
we can
before we kind of
yeah.
bust into looking at these in detail, oh, go ahead. I think there's a delay.
Oh no, I was just gonna say that's one of the things that as a designer, you you can get stuck in that loop for a long time where it's like, no, but it has to be fun because this was my great idea and I know it's going to be fun if I just have to find that right magic thing that's going to make it fun. And sometimes you just need someone to tell you that's not
That's
fun. Just
not fun.
set it to the
Yeah.
side and keep this stuff because that's really fun. That's not so easy to do.
Yeah. To me that happens a lot when there seems to be a mismatch between like I've discovered a really cool like mechanic, and then I have a theme that I really like, and
Yeah,
they just don't seem to work together. um and eventually sometimes that means that mechanic goes, you retheme it. And that's
yeah,
the nice thing about, if you do this first before you do all your gorgeous art and all that story and all that sort of stuff, it doesn't hurt so much when you throw out all that or save it for later,
yeah,
save that theme for
exactly.
some other mechanic that comes up later. I
Right.
did that with my first game, actually. I had a game that was like a hidden movement sort of game, and I created this whole story, and I really liked the art, and I was really getting into it. And then there was just something was broken, and it was always broken. And because I put all that effort into the art and the story of it, it just hurt to take that stuff away or to change it too much, because it meant I had to redo all the art. And that was a
Yeah.
really good learning experience for me to, say, oh, I shouldn't have gone that far. I should have minimized the unfun first.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
the folks who are listening and watching on Facebook and on YouTube, leave us a comment and let us know what stage. If you're, I know lots of people are working on multiple games, but if you're kind of focusing on one particular game, what sort of stage are you in with that game? And what do you think is the next stage for your game? Maybe we can use that as we're going through each of these phases. So yeah, so how do you want to do this? We got 9 steps. Do you want to sort of talk about examples of how your game went through these, or how do you want to do this?
Yeah, I mean, I think to me, what interests me most about this is if we were to hypothetically agree to a framework, and maybe it's this set of 9 steps or some modification to it, I think what's interesting about it is what you can do with it. And I can think of at least 2 things that could be useful, but it's your show, so we could talk about whatever. But
No,
I
go
guess
for
I
it.
would say the the two things that interest me are, I think it could help us to talk much more intelligently with publishers. Because we're small batch publishers ourselves, but some of us are also trying to pitch games to publishers, and submission guidelines are all
Hmm.
over the place, and they're a total mess. It's like you have to have blind play tested your game twice. Why and what does that mean? Like, what do you think that
What does that
means, and
actually
what is
mean?
the
Yeah.
reason for that? Yeah. Or, we want stuff that is, ready to publish. It's bulletproof. It's perfect. Like,
Yeah. Well, how do you
if
know
we were talking
that?
about it, yeah,
Mhm.
if we were talking about it from the standpoint of, we will look at stuff that's DRL3. Oh, okay. I know you're willing to look at stuff that's pretty rough, but that has some real upside potential. You want to get in on something that's raw and unpolished, and you want to be the one to polish it. Got it. Here's the game that
Mhm.
I want to show you. You want something
Yeah, that
that's
is.
DRL 6 or 7. You want something that is buttoned up, that I've done proper graphic
Yeah.
design on. I don't have anything like that,
Yeah.
but if I did,
But you're
here's what it
right.
would be, that kind of thing. Yeah,
Yeah, different publishers are different, and pitching is different. I've talked to people who, there's a lot of people who've been working on this same game for 3 or 4 years, and they are pitching it, and it's, like you said, it's kind of like this is bulletproof. And there are publishers that are looking for that, but then there are other publishers who definitely want to put their fingerprints on a game. They want to commission the art, they want to play test it, they want to pick it apart, they want to develop it. And that is a publisher personality too. Right now with the Christmas game collection that I'm working on, which is kind of my big first published project, I specifically asked told people, I just want to see the concept. Give me the idea. Don't worry about the art. We have all the components and things like that. But because I was putting together a collection of games, I didn't want to. I didn't want it to be like a potluck where everybody brings tortilla chips, right? I wanted it to be like, I don't want you to work hours and hours on a trick taking game and then find out I have 5 trick taking games out of these 13 games. I wanted to have variety. So that's been really interesting and really refreshing to just see things in kind of a raw format and be able to sort of tweak them or say, what if we did this? Or, hey, there's another one that has this theme. Do you think there's another theme? And to not have people having worked so far ahead in their concept that it's hard to back up out of it. So this is probably not a very traditional way of publishing, just these sort of very rough concepts, and then I'm working with people to develop them. But maybe it is for some publishers. Everybody's a little bit different. So yeah, I
yeah,
like that idea of having some sort of objective way of describing where it is in that phase, and not apologizing for what phase your game is, because there are,
yeah,
being at a
a
particular
hundred
phase,
percent.
being able to look forward and see all the possibilities too, because a lot of you're sort of, when you're talking about gates, you're going through one gate at a time, but also as you go through a gate, you're sort of shutting some doors, and your focus is becoming narrower and narrower. And to be able to do that in a conscious, directed way is, I believe, probably very valuable.
Definitely, and I think that gets to that. You teed me up perfectly for the second point I was going to make, which is, I think it helps us to help other designers as well. That if we have some kind of framework like this, then if you say, look, I'm at a DRL 6 design, I'm basically trying to refine the way I teach the game so that you can understand it. I'm not really looking for feedback about, oh, what if you added in, worker placement to this thing. It's like, no, 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 no. That
Right.
was 3 steps ago. Right now, what I'm trying to do is just explain the game and make it intuitive for play. So I want you to help me do that. I don't want you to necessarily give
Yes.
me wacky stuff. On the other hand, though,
Yeah, or catch the
sometimes,
typos in my rule book, which is
yeah,
just a
well,
draft. Yeah,
right,
that's very important because, yeah, because playtesting, sometimes we forget to say what kind of feedback you're looking for, and I always forget to say that, and I love when
yeah,
people ask, what kind of feedback are you looking for? Because, oh, okay, yeah, this is a rough concept. It's not a full game. I want to know exactly what you like, or, I want to, what's unfun about it. Can
yeah,
we change that on the spot? Like, that's the kind of playtest this is. Or I'm getting ready to send this to publishers, and I want you to break the game, please.
yeah.
um very different things.
Well, and I think it also helps to structure, I mean, designers who are new designers sometimes as you said, do things we might say out of order, or do things in not the most productive order. And I think this helps to think about that it's like, oh, hey, look at this great art that I have commissioned for this game that I am once I've got this art, I can finally play test it for the first time. And we all say, what? Why did you do
What?
that? And,
Yeah,
but you don't know what you
but it might
don't
be
know.
the way
So
they work. Yeah.
yeah, you have to learn. But I think this helps to think along those lines as well, that it's like, look, that the art stuff is, level 6, level 7, you're way back here at 2 or 3. Just scribble some stuff on, on some index cards or something. Just get
Mm-hmm.
that thing on the table, but don't worry about making it pretty. That's, all the things that we know. This
Yeah.
sort of encodes all of that, I think, in this one simple construct.
Yeah.
So I like it for that.
So let's talk about idea conceptualization. So you've designed more than one game. What does idea conceptualization look like to you when you get an idea? When you have a little light bulb go off, what happens after that? How do you consider that a conceptualized idea versus just a fleeting thought or a daydream?
Oh, there's very little difference for me. This is, people who follow my Twitter account just know that, like, I'll just pop up at any random time of the day or night, and like, I think there should be a game about sewer divers diving for fatbergs in the city sewer or something, whatever,
Oh
whatever
no!
stupid stuff. It's like, but that to me is is what's so much
Yeah,
fun, is
but
just
you wrote it down. Yeah,
yeah, what's the weirdest idea, or some kind of, everything is like, oh, what if we had worker placement with a twist? I mean, yeah, that's any kind of way that you come up with new stuff is I think valid. But to me, it's just like, you know what weird thing can I think of? Like, what if we had, you get inspiration in the weirdest places. Like, I just read about something that, like, this person had gone to every Super Bowl or something like that. And so you think about, like, what if they missed one because they were sick that year? And then what if there was a time travel machine that you could use to go back and heal the gaps in your streaks, or something like that. So and then it's like, okay, well, how do we? So that's sort of an idea one stage. I have no idea how to make a game out of that. I just know that that's a wacky and silly idea for a game, and uh, perhaps that could be fun. That to me is what conceptualization is. It's completely unfettered. It's
yeah,
completely
it's the
unconstrained
inspiration.
by, yeah, it's just, it's just top of the head, light bulb goes on, lightning strikes, whatever. Just write it down, write all those ideas down. That is
So
my
do you
approach for that.
tend to be inspired by something mechanical or something more of a storytelling theme, or is it a little bit of both?
It's a little bit of both. It's kind of funny. Historically, I've always been the latter, and so, I've tried to come up with game mechanics that work with some story or something like that, or some setting or whatever, and that has always worked pretty well for me. But it's led to games that are a little bit complex. Like my current game, Evangelist, is about writing the four Christian gospels, and I think the mechanics are really very evocative of writing a book in the ancient world. I think they work, but it's also kind of a complicated ish, Euro game. It's definitely not minimalist and simple. So I've kind of been trying the other way of doing things mechanically, and what I find is it's much harder for me to answer the questions of, okay, but why am I doing this? Like, who am I in this abstract thing, and what's my goal? I just find it so much
Yeah,
easier to have a story that answers those questions for me, because I'm not a
right. Stories
Nietzsche
have
who can come up with
feelings
math.
attached to them
Yeah, yeah,
more
yeah.
than a mechanic. Sometimes some people get, like I really want to make a game with lots and lots of wooden dice. I have no idea why. I don't know what the theme's going to be, but there's
Yeah.
something about chucking a whole lot of wooden dice that I really want to do someday.
Yeah.
Just something like that. Brian, hey Brian, who was on a couple weeks ago. What if the designer inspired
Right.
by the look and graphic design of the game early on in development? So that's a fair point about there are some beautiful games out there, and sometimes the graphic design is essential to the mechanics and the story of a game, right?
Sure. Yeah. Right. This isn't meant to be prescriptive. I think this is meant to just kind of think about the way things usually happen. I mean, I guess the best example of this happening is Tapestry. I guess Jamie started with getting he wanted to make a Civ game, and so he commissioned sculptures for the buildings that were going to be in this game before he started the design, is my understanding. And is Tapestry a good game as a result? I haven't played it, so I have no idea. But I think it has its fans. So yeah, I think there's all different ways
All different ways to.
that you can do things. And I have a friend, a co-designer of mine actually, who is a pro graphic designer. So it's no extra effort for him to make his designs glorious. It's just that's
Mm-hmm.
what he enjoys in the creation process. And it's like, but now you have to rip this thing
Right.
apart. And he's like, okay, I don't care. That's what I like doing. So whatever
Yeah.
works, it's
Well,
fine.
something. So working smarter, I think, is a good thing in this uh area, in this step, you would say, right?
Yeah.
So, but it's also, so let me just tell a story. So I've been working on a game about gardening, about permaculture and how plants interrelate with each other and planting a garden. And in the early on in that, I learned how to use Card Maker. So I learned merging and
Yeah.
using spreadsheets and things like that to really churn out cards really fast. And I thought, well, this is great because I can get a prototype out really quickly. But I find myself very easily getting sucked into making a spreadsheet. I'm a little bit INTJ also, like you.
Nice.
Um, and I realized today I just cut out. I got something in a package today, 3 of them, and they all had this nice tag board. So I cut it up into cards and just scribbled up some cards today and just started manipulating them. And I got so much more done in 15 minutes playing with colored pencils in these cards and saying, oh, there's no fun there, there's no fun there. Whereas I can easily spend 3 hours on the spreadsheet trying to make the good prototype ready. So for me, like, that's a risk too.
Yeah.
I'm learning more and more, like the construction paper and cereal box shard approach tends to be better
Yeah.
for me. Anyway,
Yeah,
so
definitely.
so once we have an idea conceptualized, notional term mechanics and scoring rules defined. So what does that
Yeah.
look like for you?
Yeah, here it's just okay, now I've got my game idea about these time traveling sports enthusiasts or whatever. What are they actually doing? And so to me, this almost always comes back to something I talk about in my book, which is very common idea of define who the player is, what is their goal, and what is their struggle, what's the obstacle to achieving
Mhm.
that goal. I mean, I think that's really, if you have a game that is, has some kind of a story that you're hanging on to it, answering those questions really helps you say what is the game in this. But I think it's also, to me, that's where the opportunity for creativity lies, because I think what's a very common thing that I see is, oh, I would like, here's an idea. I had a game about um idea about vuvuzelas, and so these are the long plastic horns that they play at sports games and stuff like that.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, it's I don't know what language vuvuzela comes from. Anyway, they were
Who's
very
it?
popular at the 2010 World Cup in South Africa. Everyone at every stadium was playing these vuvuzelas. Okay, so in game design, what everyone else would do is, oh, I want to make a game about these weird, plastic horns, and I'm going to have some cards, and each is going to have a different color vuvuzela, and I'm trying to collect sets of vuvuzelas, and now I've created something that is exactly like every other game, and could equally well be about um, you know,
Grasshoppers.
pastries or
Berries.
grasshoppers
Yeah.
or whatever. And so I think the trick here is to identify what is the real, I don't necessarily mean the unique twist. I'm not a hook guy per se, but what is the angle here that makes this game really, that's going to make it fun to work on. So for me, with that idea, it's like this game pretty much has to be played with actual vuvuzelas. And now how are we going to do that? Because you can't really play those indoors. So it's a game that you have to play outside. And what are we doing with them? Blah, blah, blah. And that's sort of the road you go down. So I think that to me is what's so important about step two, is don't sell your idea short by just reducing it to, well, I'm going to have 5 suits of cards and I'm trying to impress the nobles and I'm trying to build the best, blah, 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 blah. Like that
Yeah.
those games
It's
aren't
a
fun to
good
play or to work on. So,
it sounds like a good stage to ask, why exactly am I making this
yeah,
choice? Like,
yeah,
why does it, you can sort of like throw things out and say, okay, well, let's try this, but then back it up, like, it's this because of that. when I was
Yeah.
working on Battle and Tau, which is the first game that I signed with Bright Eye Games, which is in development right now.
Nice.
I made a game about teeth, and it made things so much easier to know how many teeth are in a human mouth and how many different types of teeth, and this is the arrangement of the teeth. And then I could mess with the mechanics, but anytime anybody was like, well, why are these teeth? Like, because that's the way they are in a mouth, and I don't
Yeah.
have to think about it anymore.
Yeah.
Like, there's the framework, there's the constraint, which we talked a couple weeks ago about contests and constraints and how people like constraints. There's the constraint. Now let me work the game around it. So it's sort of identifying your turn mechanics, your scoring scrolls, but also what are your constraints? What are the things that you know have to be this way about this game, or it doesn't work? Like you said, if it
Yeah.
was a very quiet, sip some tea and play a game about vuvuzelas, it probably wouldn't come across, right?
Right.
It has to be
Yeah,
loud and
well, and
boisterous.
and
Does that
same
make
thing with
sense?
your game. That's exactly right. That by having a layout that's, the mouth, then this couldn't just be a game about collecting valuable jewelry, and it couldn't be a game about, having the best nobles in your
Right.
court or whatever. Actually, it could be that with some thought if they're sort
Yeah.
of anyway. No, but the the point
Ooh.
is that you've sort
Yeah.
of captured
Well,
what is unique about this idea, and now you've leaned into the
mhm.
uniqueness by the way that you
Yeah.
gamified it. So that is exactly, I
Yeah.
think, what happens in step two. And yeah, that's a super great
Yeah,
example. It's
and
really cool.
come to think of it, actually, Bah Humbug, which I'm working on now, came out of the idea of I was thinking, where the heck did this Days of Christmas song come up? And I got into thinking about the history and everything of that, of the 12 Days of Christmas. And there are other games that have done this, come to find out. But I thought, what if there was a card deck where there were 12 12s, 11 11s, 10 10s, 9 9s, all the way down to just 1 1? And what would that do
Yeah.
for the statistics of the deck and the chances of the deck and all that sort of stuff? And started playing with that. And that's how this came about. It was just that. And once I had defined that, well, that's the card count. That's the way it has to be because that's the way the song is. It made it so much easier to play around with everything
Yeah.
else when I knew what was. Because sometimes, I don't know if you've ever had a game like that where you like, this is what I'm going to make a game about. And then you say, and it's going to be about this and this. And then all of a sudden, the more you develop this sort of goes away. And then you add something else on, and then these things sort of go away. And before
Yeah.
you know it, you're like, how did I get here? What am I even
Right.
making a game about anymore?
Yeah, for sure.
Brian says, good point. Experimentation is maybe easier for us small batch designers since you can play mechanisms, components outside what is considered the norm. I think, yeah, so that's an interesting idea. It's something that I know I've heard a lot about publishers and about designing games is like, what is the component count? Is this going to be profitable to make this game? Does it make sense? Is there a market for this game? And yeah, we should still consider those things. But as a small batch publisher, if your goal is just to make a great game that is fun and maybe you make 100 people happy with it, it's less important maybe to some of us to do something that you're going to be able to sell for $15.
Yeah.
Something that's going to be bigger in terms of components or crazier, or maybe it's a 4-hour game that is just super a blast and there's certain people who will play it, whatever. Rachel asks, have you ever hit a point where your game was missing something but you weren't sure what? If so, how did you get past that?
Oh
And if anybody
yeah.
else listening has an answer to this, chime in too.
Yeah. Emily, why don't you take that? No, that's a great question, but yeah, for sure. I think for me, so I don't really. So my best designs of the games I've finished, and I would say are really the best I can do, took 15 years, 12 years. Evangelist, my new game, was like light speed for me. That only took about 7 years. So I really just kind of really let things marinate and put them on the back burner because there's always something else that I could be working on. And it's like to me the best design advice I've ever internalized is this great scene in Searching for Bobby Fischer, which is this about this chess prodigy,
Yes.
and his teacher is they're poring over the board, and there's a particular sequence of moves that's going to lead to checkmate, and the kid says, I don't see it. And his teacher says, wait till you see it. says, I don't see it. He's like, wait till you see it. And that is how I've always approached game design. It's like, I don't believe in barreling ahead, and I don't believe in trying stuff just to try it. I'm not saying those aren't the right way to do things. I'm just saying those have never worked for me. And I see other designers in our playtest group bring games that it's like, this is different from last time. I changed some stuff. And it's like, well, did you change it for the better? Well, I don't know. That's what we're supposed to find out. I don't think that's what playtesting is actually for. I don't think it's very efficient if you use it that way. You're not getting as much out of everyone's time if you're just throwing spaghetti at the wall. So to me, I'd rather wait until I have a
unless you're
good...
in stage 1 or stage 0.
Yes, you're right. You're right. There are times when it's the right thing, for sure. So, but for me, like that's kind of unhelpful, right? It's just wait.
Yeah. So you're more of a back burner.
That feels like a
person.
total cop out to your question, Rachel. But that's for better or for worse, that's my answer. I bet Emily's got a better one though.
You know, I will also say that I have found it very helpful to meet with somebody whom I trust and respect as a game designer or developer. I've met a few times with John Gilmore, has helped me with when I get stuck or I'm like, this is just not working. What am I not seeing? And he will instantly say, oh, this is something that's broken. Eric at Talon Strikes looked at one of my games last year because it was like, how do I fix this? And he helped me figure out, well, this is the symptom, or this is the issue. If you can identify what is the not fun, as you were saying, sometimes it's easier to prescribe a solution to it. I think the worst thing you can do is ignore it. I had a game like that recently where I just sort of like, this is clunky. It's hard to explain, but eventually they get it,
right.
after
it'll
3
be okay,
turns.
right? Yeah.
But everybody sees it, and everybody who playtests it will see it. Every publisher will see it, and you'll have the same conversation over and over. And that's when it's time to just kind of put it back or talk to somebody else about it and say, be honest with me. What do you think about this? And what can we do to change it? And Brian also has, Brian Laporte has played some things with me too, and just said, I don't see it. My husband is really good at this. He'd be like, I don't see a game here. I don't see the game. And it's always like, I know there's a game here somewhere, but it's good to know that right up front. Anyway, so yeah, when I'm not sure what's missing, I do also kind of put things on the back burner too and come back to them, because eventually I'll be just brainstorming about something else, or I'll be working on a different game and something will come up and we say, this doesn't work here, but it goes somewhere else, which actually somebody else is asking about. Do you find yourself recycling game mechanics that you like, or using something that works well into a new game? I definitely have that. Pentacular Circus, which I just finished working on, was about the 8th theme and probably 20th set of mechanics on a spelling game that I was working on, and it's all recycled. I have so many things that I recycle in. Absolutely, I just keep them in Google folders so I can search them later.
Yeah, I love doing that kind of thing as well. I definitely think, that you could, absolutely. And I think that's something you build up over time. And I think that sort of relates to Rachel's question, because it reduces the emotional investment you have in any one game. If this is my one, and everyone has to start somewhere. This is my one game and I have to make it work because it's my game, If you have 25 games that you're working on in various stages or whatever, it's like, I can't make this work. It needs something, but then it's going to be more complex if I add something. And it was really just supposed to be a little bit of, a light confection. And now I'm trying to make it a strategy game. Maybe just let me just set this aside for now or forever. But, the cool thing that I put in here, hey, maybe I can find a home for that in this other game somewhere else, which, that's such a satisfying thing when you can mine your own designs for cool ideas. I think that's way more fun than
writers do that,
other
musicians do that, everybody does it.
Yeah, it's great.
The other thing I'll say about this issue is to step away from game design and start playing some games, especially games that feel the way that you want your players to feel. If you want like a light, silly party game and it's just not working, play some light, silly party games. If you want something that is a Carcassonne type of feeling game, play Carcassonne again and say, what is it about Carcassonne that makes me feel that way, and how can I maybe tap into that? I think playing games, so many of us are heads down in our own designs that we forget to play games too. So that's also something that can help. So let's move on to let's actually skip ahead a little bit because I know we're coming up at an hour here. So we've got sort of the low fidelity or partial prototype work, and rough playtesting confirms that there's a game here. My husband would say, "Hey, that's a game." Then we go into defining the rule set, and I think that is an interesting phase that a lot of people skip over, and just having a Google Doc saying this is how many players that I think could play this game, this is about how long I think it would take, these are the actual components that I'm using. And the one that I always forget about is, what is the game end and what's the point? How do I know that I have won the game? In this game I am a blah 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 trying to accomplish blah 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 by doing blah 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 blah, and I know I've won when blah
Yep.
happens. Just sometimes sitting down to write that paragraph, you realize, oh, I haven't defined any of those things, but I've already
Yeah.
got a prototype. I'm already sketching images, and so just having that, and not. I've gone away from putting rulebooks in InDesign or other. I use Google Docs completely until I'm ready, basically, to put it in the layout and send it to print personally. That's the way I do it, because I had a great rulebook when I signed Battle Dental, and I just put it all back into Google Docs because there's so much work to do and so many questions to ask and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
Having that Google Doc from the start and all the way to the finish is really helpful to me.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think in
Play
this stage,
testing.
well, so
Yeah.
one thing I'll say about this stage is, well, two things really. I think, but the more important is what you said. Um, One of the points in my book that I completely stole from somebody else. There was a writer named Jonathan Deegan, who in the parenthetical, or kind of late in a point, a blog of his, um, said something that has resonated with me forever, which is, your scoring design is your game design. That is what directs player behavior. So I think this stage is where you really codify what is it players are pursuing, and you can't, and exactly what you say, you can't leave that undefined. I think so many of us are conditioned to think that, or are motivated to think that turn mechanics are the currency of the realm. Oh, look at my
Right.
cool way of selecting actions. Oh boy, what
Yeah.
fun that's going to be. And to me, that's the same as like saying, oh, look at this great new steering wheel in this car. Look what fun you're going to have doing this. Nobody
Yeah.
nobody sits in a car and does this. It's like the point is to move the car,
That's
and what you're
hilarious.
moving the car
Yeah.
toward is your goal. And in game design, that is your
Yeah.
scoring rules. So I
Yeah. I
just
think
wanted to underscore the point you made, because I think it's so
yeah.
important in this
I think that's a
stage to,
great analogy.
yeah.
I think another way to say it that I've heard other people say um, is this a game or an activity?
Yeah,
And
sure.
an activity is a way to spend time, like playing solitaire is more of an activity, like the actual game 54 cards solitaire is more of an activity, I would say, than a game. Sometimes, playing Cards Against Humanity, in my opinion, much more of an activity than a game. But playing something like I don't know, Castles of Burgundy, like there's definitely more of a game there. You're trying to,
Yeah,
in my everybody's got a different idea of what a game is versus an activity, but
sure.
I think there's a spectrum
Right.
there of like, I'm having a good time doing it versus I am trying to do that thing
Yeah,
and I'm going to beat everybody else at it, or we're going to have this great success moment when we cooperate and fix
yeah.
something, whatever it is. uh, David says, hi Emily and Jeff, I struggle trying to write down the rules to my game in a way that is concise and makes sense. Any tips for writing rules?
Oh
Writing
boy.
rules is
Um,
a daunting task for a lot of people.
it's very difficult. I think so. I touch on this a little in my book, but I'm not really a master rule writer by any means, except insofar as, I think, not everybody loves the elements of style. I think it's one of the best books ever written, but I think it's a really helpful book for learning how to do technical writing for something like game design, because one of the key principles in there's really two Strunk White principles that I think are crucial to game design rulebook writing. One is omit needless words, and the second is write with nouns and verbs. And I think if you do
Yes,
those two
verbs.
things, there's really no need for adjectives, ornamentation, flowery stuff. Your game design is all business. Your rule book should be all business, and you can always find more concise ways to say things. So,
Hmm.
lots of editing, lots of I also find just workshopping your rules with other people is really helpful. I think the whole
Yeah.
to me, blind play testing is super overrated. I I think it's important, but really to start, I just need you to read this and tell me if you understand it and maybe explain it back to me. If we can
Yeah.
even get that far, that gives me
Yeah.
something I can work on to improve. I don't even need to see you play it to get valuable
Yeah. Just
information from
do
you
I
reading it.
think I could be able to play
Yeah.
it from these rules?
Yeah. Just
Absolutely.
just
And
read it and
David,
tell me what you think. Yeah.
yeah, and David, follow-up question for you. Are you talking about content? Like what is the actual outline? You're struggling with what to put in the rulebook, or are you talking about style? Because those are two very different things. And I think a reason that I did a lot of rulebook editing last year. That's kind of how I padded up my budget to be able to spend money, is by earning money editing rules for people. And I think what people struggle with most is that it's like writing a short story and also writing a technical manual at the same time, because you have to kind of put on this marketing hat, this the engagement that you talk about, right? Somebody from that first paragraph when they read the rules, like, oh, I am a wizard casting spells and trying to go over stuff. You have to like get somebody excited to be in your game's world. But then you also have to, it has to be like so here's an analogy. Um, um, a cookbook, right? So you're going to start reading a recipe. Nowadays, it's totally out of control because you have to read an entire novel to get to the recipe. But if you just look like an old like Betty Crocker cookbook, it would be like, these are the most moist, buttery waffles that you've ever tasted, and they go great with breakfast or brunch on the weekends. It really makes it a special meal for you. Like, okay, cool. My mouth is watering. I'm ready to make some waffles. Then it has to be like, plug in your waffle iron, like mix this with that, then do this, then, so it very quickly shifts from like getting somebody excited about what it is to actual the steps of doing it. I think making that switch sometimes is hard for people because sometimes they excel in one or they excel in the other. So being able to sort of, here's the thematic introduction of my game, the movie preview, and then here's the technical manual, that is I think something to think about that helps people. I also encourage people to write a style sheet for their game when they're going down the rules. Like, this is what, because that's when I was proofreading rules. That's the biggest thing, is like somewhere somebody will call something a worker, and then they'll call it a meeple, and then they'll call it a person.
Yeah.
And it just, as the reader, the first time you're like, wait, are there also people in the game, or are the peoples the same as the meeples? So just having like, in this game we have meeples and I'm calling them this, and the verb that I use is that you place them on the map, or you put them in the city, or you send them to the city, whatever it is. Define that, and then just be consistent about using that. That's probably the number one thing that I do when I correct people's rule books, is just consistency of language. So that helps.
I think
Let's
there's
see.
a
Let's talk.
broader conversation about. I was trying to. I don't see how to comment here. I was going to post a link to a blog post I wrote, but I think there's a broader conversation we all need to have in gaming about how best to teach people to play our games who may not know very much about gaming. How do you get into the mind of someone who doesn't know how this game already works? And so there's a lot that we know, we being humanity, about how people learn and how best to present information, how best to structure teaching. And I don't think rule books or game teaching is listen to me talk for 10 minutes about how to play this game. Okay, now we're going to play this game. 2 seconds after that ends, wait, what are we doing again?
Questions.
Like,
Yeah.
right, we don't know how to teach. So I think this is a
Yeah.
broader thing, way beyond the scope of this conversation,
Yeah.
but I think something we all need to continue thinking about and experimenting with, because no one's quite nailed it exactly, so we can all
Yeah.
improve and learn from each
There
other,
is
I
a
think. Yeah.
great video. Shut Up and Sit Down did a great video, and I go back to it like every 6 months when I'm writing rules or trying to help people teach games better. And I think it's called just like How to Teach Board Games Like a Pro, from Shut Up and Sit Down. Check it out. Just do a Google search for that, and he walks you through. It's just very great video. I highly recommend it to everybody, and I send it to a lot of people before their Kickstarter campaigns or when we're working on rule books, because it helps back it up. and just talk about the basics. So the next step is playtesting for balance, streamlining, and user experience. This is a stage that I think involves a lot of listening.
Agreed. Yeah, this is where your playtesters are really important. Where you have to give them permission to try stuff, and where you have to see the tricky thing is exactly what we're talking about. That in the early stage of a playtester's or gamers for that matter growth with a game, they don't really know what they're doing. They're fumbling around, and I think you can help them get up the learning curve with tutorial style teaching, with introductory heuristics, with whatever the case may be, scaffolding that helps them to get into the game better so that they can get to the stuff you really want to know about, which is this game good? Is it deep? Is it replayable? Is it
Yeah.
fun? All that kind of stuff. But I think that the challenge then becomes, what I've seen happen so often is that people kind of cue off of the designer an awful lot. It's like, well, this designer must know all the heuristics for their game, so I see they're driving up the bid on this. That must be the right thing to do. Or you'll play against the design. It's like, oh, the designer is the pro, so we've got to beat the designer. We've got to really dogpile on that person or whatever. I think this is really, everyone wants to play the game so you can experience, but I think this is the stage where you have to say, we're off the map at this point. I don't know what the best way to play this game is. I'm not even good at this game. I don't know all the heuristics. So you've all eclipsed me. Play the game, try to win, try to break the game, tell me what was fun about what you tried or not. One of the things I've started thinking about in terms of depth is, if depth is associated with growth as you're playing a game over and over, ask players, what did you learn about the game when you played it this time? Did you come up with anything new? Did you feel like you were learning things, or were you just kind of turning the crank on something that has worked the last 3 times you played? Like, all that kind of stuff is, I think, happening in this stage where you're really refining this and trying to make it excellent and not just okay. There are a zillion okay games in the world, but you want a good one.
Yeah, I think that's key, and I think anytime you cannot play with the play testers and just take notes is great. I think that's very important, and it's also seems to be like, if I'm playtesting a game with the designer, it seems to be harder to give feedback sometimes when the designer is playing, or if the designer beats you, like you said. I think so I think not being a player when you're playtesting your games and actually being an observer and watching it unfold is important. I think also playtesting, there's a lot of avenues that we can use to playtest our games with other designers, but I think it's also important to playtest our games with our target audience. And for me, like with Small Furry Games, my mission is really to design games for casual and family gamers that I can teach to somebody who maybe doesn't know much about any board games beyond Scrabble or Monopoly or something like that, that I can teach to them in 10 minutes and that they'll enjoy, and that's going to hit that sweet spot for them. So some designers can put themselves in that shoes and give me the feedback I want, but nothing compares to actually just like going to a bar or a coffee shop and saying, or bringing my friends and saying, hey, will you guys try this out? And they'll tell me, what they think, and they'll ask. So here's a funny total tangent story, but I was reading the rules out loud for one of my games to some non-gamers, and I said the word meeple, and it was to represent a particular character in the game. And for the entire playtest, somebody was calling the character Mr. Meatball because they had never heard the term meeple. And I just told myself, just let it go, don't correct it. And it was just like, it was a really good exercise for me. But I was like, you know what, I can't be condescending and say, no, it's actually called a meeple, and this is what it's called. No. And it made me realize I'm taking the word meeple out of my instructions because my target audience doesn't necessarily know what a meeple
doesn't know what
is.
that means.
But just something like that, it's so important to play test with people who don't necessarily play a lot of games or who aren't designers.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's hard to do as as a game enthusiast, because I don't know, I think we all tend to be nerds and pedantic about stuff and like, oh, well, Meeple, here's a learning opportunity for you. Meeple was coined
Yeah.
by Allison Ansell in Boston in about 2003 or so. And, it's like, who freaking cares? Like, it's, so
Yeah.
I think,
No.
you're exactly right. We struggle to connect uh, with people who aren't as enthusiastic
Right.
about games as we are, and I think that's an important part of design thinking. It's empathy with the intended
Right. Rather than
user.
saying this
And
is a deck building area control game, you can say this is a game where you're trying to take over your pigeons trying to take over this city block.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know, something like
yep,
that is going to
exactly,
resonate with that
exactly,
audience. I mean,
yeah.
yep. Yep. Brian says, "Yep." Not everyone knows these terms. Derek asked, "What is the difference between streamlining, and simplifying?" So that's an important distinction.
Yeah, to me, the difference is simplifying is just there's too much going on. To me, simplifying is I'm butting up against my typical player, my target player's cognitive load. I'm placing demands on them that are unreasonable, and they're spending more time complying with the rules of my game or trying to process the game state because there's a crap ton of information or icons or bits going on. They're thinking more about what they're supposed to be doing than what they want to do. So they're not having
Right.
fun making decisions. They're assimilating
Is there
information.
bookkeeping or whatever? Yeah.
Yeah, that to me is a case where simplification means I need to pare this back a little bit.
Yeah, and I think a lot of
Streamlining.
that
Go
comes
ahead.
out in I think a lot of that also comes out in, the rule book writing too. Sometimes when
Yeah,
you're you've got your little shards of paper and you're moving around, something is intuitive to you, and then when you go to write it down, you think like, this is taking me 3 paragraphs to explain this one exception that always keeps happening. Can I just fix it so that one exception doesn't happen? You know? It's
exactly,
like
exactly.
it's
Yes.
creative laziness to me. Like, if it
Yeah,
takes that long to explain, it's probably not necessary, and it's probably not gonna stick in a player's head either. It's gotta be intuitive. Intuitive,
yeah.
that's the word, I think. When simplifying is you could think of it as dumbing down, but streamlining makes something more intuitive and makes it just flow quicker, in my
Agreed.
opinion.
And
But
I
you were
think
gonna say something.
well, right. No, I agree with that completely. But also, I think streamlining is specifically with an eye towards making the game more of what it's trying to become. I think games sort of have a life of their own, and you're trying to guide. It's weird. I can't really explain it, but you're not so much hammering on this block of marble until it's what you want it to be. It's more like you're shaping it into what it itself is trying to become, if that makes
What does the
sense.
game want to be? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a key
If that
question.
doesn't make sense, forget about it. But so I think streamlining to me is that. And I'll give you an example for my game, Evangelist. So this is a game about writing the Bible, basically the first 4 books of the New Testament. And this happens in the 60s or 70s AD. And at this time, the Emperor Nero is persecuting the Christian church. And so there are, at one time in the game, there are mechanics that were built around that. It doesn't matter what they are. Um, but players said to me, this stuff is all interesting. It's historical. That's cool. But it really is a distraction for us from this whole Bible writing thing. You're telling us with the scoring system that we're going to get
Mhm.
points for putting these cards in these arrangements and whatnot, that's what we're supposed to be doing. But then you're also making us, evade the Romans and deal with, you know, things getting harder and all that kind of thing on the board. Um, to me, removing that was an example of streamlining, not simplifying. It wasn't so much that the game was too complex. No one really had a problem with those rules. It was that it was a distraction from what the game was telling them. This is what this game is about. So I think that to me is what streamlining is more is helping a
Mm.
game to become itself. Sometimes to the exclusion of stuff that is very painful to take out. But sometimes you got to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, what is the one big thing, in the game, and is everything else supporting that one big thing and helping make that big thing more interesting versus trying to compete and be 2 games in the same game?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So the next, stage is extensive refinement of the UI. Rules document is perfected, both tested, by representative audience. Yeah. So this feels almost like it's sort of the point a point that you reach. I guess this is a
I think
process
so.
too. I mean, it is.
Yeah.
It's
No,
there's a
I
lot
think
of
they all are.
editing, but it
It's
feels like more like, okay, we've made that decision and we have documented it.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I think we can all find that, even though many of us are not graphic designers per se, I think it's always good with every playtest to try and tinker with the graphic design of your game and worry about stuff like text versus
Right.
icons. Can you make the icon family?
Right.
Sometimes people like, I think we all go on gameicons.net and pull icons. Okay, great. So you've got 25 different icons in your game, but like these all mean resources, these all mean actions, these all mean points. So can you sort of encode that into the game's user interface? That doesn't necessarily mean that's what the graphic designer is going to do. That might not be the choice that they make, but you're at least trying to think about how do I relate different kinds of information and present it to the players in a way that's intuitive. And I think that's just something that happens naturally as you progress along with the game. It doesn't ever have to be pretty
Hmm.
or anything. But I think worrying about the functionality of how to sometimes it does loop you back around to game design stuff. It's like I have all these cards, like all these games that have card tableaus, and every card has a different effect that's written in 9-point font, and the effect of that is you're across the table from me, and it would probably be helpful for me to know what your 10 cards can do, but I don't
Yeah,
feel
I
like
just not
asking
even
you,
gonna
so
put the
I'm gonna play suboptimally because I don't care to do that.
hmm.
How could we have made that game? How could we have made that information more accessible so that I could
Right.
be motivated to care about what your cards can do? That kind of thing, I
Yeah,
think
that's a
is
great
important and
example. If I
distinct.
know there's a big red icon that means, like I can whatever
Yeah,
backstab you or something, and then I
yeah,
can
right.
scan for that red icon across the table. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's a great. Yeah, readability, those sorts of things. One of the things with Bah Humbug that I'm working on now is how to get, like when you have a card and you have the suit and the number on one corner, and usually you have it so that when you shuffle it, because I've been doing a lot of testing in TTS, and all the cards line up perfectly
yeah,
in TTS, and you could always see the numbers. So I'm trying to find, without being obnoxious, a way to incorporate a little number into the border, so you actually don't even notice it when you've got the nice art and the thing face up, but when you turn it and you're shuffling through the cards, you can still see it. So that's just like an example of something I'm working on. And so one thing I want to add to this is this play testing for balance. So this is a little bit out of order, maybe not, but I've found great success in releasing a print and play version of a
mm,
game to like Martin's Print and Play Hideaway on Facebook, or to some friends or people who like I mean, if it's not super unwieldy, and actually like launching it out into the world and saying, here's the game, try it and tell me what you think. And I get so many good things back. When I did my P&P campaign in December for Bah Humbug, 200 people bought it. I don't know if 200 people built it, but certainly 50 people did. And a lot of them sent back and said, oh, this one card is a little bit off, or I wish this, it was hard to take out this card, because some of the games in Bah Humbug don't use, like, there's this card called the Postman card, and it looks a lot, it has the same card back, but now it has a red border on it so that if you need to go through, you can take it right out if you don't
got
need
it.
it for the game. Just those little things um, are,
Yeah,
I think, would fall into this, and it saves you so many headaches. And I think that this stage is important, getting people to not get hung up or forget a rule that makes them frustrated about your game.
yeah. Well,
Yeah,
yeah, 100%. And what you're saying is so true because step seven with you're paying a graphic designer, they bill hourly, and it can be a lot hourly. So
yeah,
if you can give them a really bulletproof or as bulletproof as
yeah.
you can
Some
make
art
it
direction.
graphic design, yeah, then that's less stuff they have to come up with and design. They're just gonna make it look nice for you, and that's a lot. You know, when you're doing a small batch, that's real money that you're spending on some of that
Yeah,
stuff. So the more
yeah.
refinement you can do with
And
an
I've
approach
learned
like what you
that
said, yeah,
Yeah, and I've learned that when the first time I commissioned art, I was very much like, "Well, you're the artist. I respect your opinion." I was very sort of fluffy and wishy washy about it, and I learned very quickly that they wanted to, like, "What do you need? What are the requirements? Give me the constraints." and I'll get it for you. And I've found that even just having a Google document saying, here's kind of the pose that I think this character is going to
Yeah.
be in, here's the artistic style, it's Victorian period, here's the clothing and what it looks like. Just doing a quick Google image search and sending that to them, I get stuff back within like 2 days.
Yeah.
It's so much easier than but also I've tested some things and I know how that's going to relate to the game or if it's not going to be readable in the game. So having this step 6 after those other steps, you don't have to go back and commission an artist to change an entire illustration because now something needs to be green instead of purple or have a star on it instead of a heart or whatever, because you already know why you've made those decisions and they're already codified.
Yep.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
very cool.
Yeah.
All right, so then we get a prototype, right? So we try the print run, and then probably do more testing of the actual graphic design and those sorts
Ideally,
of things.
yeah. Yeah, that's right. So now this comes into the part where you're talking to now about project management and kind of what is the time that you've allocated for this. And I think this is really, if you're running a Kickstarter, this is the point where I think you're inclined to now, hey, look, everybody, I've got the production prototype back from the factory. Yay, we're going to start the real run soon. But oftentimes, like, there's still a lot of stuff that you need to correct as a result of stuff, maybe because things don't look the way you thought they were going to, there were mistakes made.
Mm-hmm.
You throw the thing on the table and it's like, oh, this looked great on the computer screen, but on the table there's this, that, or the other problem. So you don't want to rush through this stage if you can help it. I think you
Yeah,
really want to allow some time for some iteration through step 7. it's
yeah,
it's not just I make the prototype, I publish the game.
yeah, and it's
It's
tempting. And a
Yeah.
lot of playtesters, I have a lot of the pretty prototypes of some of my games, and I play them with friends and say, "Oh, how can I buy it? When is it?" And it's like,
Yeah,
"Oh,
yeah,
like I really want to give you a copy, but it's not ready.
yeah,
It
please
won't be
wait.
ready for a while."
Yeah,
So it is a tempting time to kind of rush things, and I've done that too, like with contest entries, like entries, like okay, now I can make a video. I could throw this up on Kickstarter today and probably sell some copies of it. But is it going to be a great game? No, it's not ready yet. Um, yeah. So speaking of project management, Kat asked, "What kind of systems do you use to track game development?" Because my IT background, I use a combination of Kanban and SDLC with elements of Gantt charts to
yeah,
track.
that's
So
a
I've seen some publishers do this too. Jasper
yeah,
at Pine Island Games, when he sends out his emails, he has like a little. He's got like however I don't know if there's 9 if he uses the same sort of readiness things, but he definitely has
yeah,
like a red, green, yellow sort of stoplight of here's where
right.
this game is in development, which I think might be as beneficial to him as it is for his backers and the people following his games too. Do you have something like that?
I didn't do anything formal like that for this particular game, but I think, you know, to me, the essentials of project management, for people who don't know this, it's an entire academic discipline, books, websites, TED Talks, whatever. Help yourself to them. If you are running a Kickstarted game, you are running a project. And thinking about it that way is really important to your customers to be able to hit on time. And basically, project management is as simple as looking at the end state you're trying to achieve, looking at your current state, and decomposing what
Like
has to
that.
happen in between into a series of tasks. And then for each task, you're going to assign resources to that, which are both money and assets, people doing things.
Mm-hmm.
And then you
Time.
talk about the
Mm-hmm.
dependencies between those tasks. I can't get my final card done until I have the art for that card. So, okay, this is subordinate to this, and okay. And then once you have those dependencies in place, now you can talk about putting together a schedule. I know I need
Mm-hmm.
to do this, to do this, to do this. This task is going to take this long. This task is going to take this long. And I need these things in place before I can attempt this task. So therefore, this task is also
Yeah.
dependent on those other things, and blah, blah, blah. That's basically project management. And a
Mm-hmm.
Gantt chart is one way of visualizing a project. That's kind of like, here, I'm going to do this step. Then I'm going to do this step. Then I'm going to do this
Yeah.
step.
I can't do
And
this
then
until I do that.
yeah, and then I'm assigning, how long I think that's going to take, and then I find what is the critical path. It's called the things that all the long poles in the tent basically all lined up, because it might
Mm-hmm.
be I need to order wooden bits. Well, I can do that anytime before I have to
Right.
fill boxes, but I can't fill boxes until I have boxes. So I need boxes. That means I need graphic design. That means I need art. That means I need
Yeah.
everything that is going to be written on the box. And so it's like my critical path to filling boxes is all the stuff that goes
Yeah.
into my
What's
box.
going to hold
That's
something
the
else
stuff
up
I'm
if
going
I
to
don't do
manage.
it now?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's the
And I
stuff I'm
think
going to
two
worry
things,
about.
there's kind of like two side effects of this particular step in the process. Well, I guess project management, but when you sit down to do project management, which I guess would align with, let's see, well, I guess this whole thing is project management, right? Do the
Yeah.
9 steps. But
In
when
a
I
way,
sit
yeah.
down to do
Yeah.
this, I always realize two things. The first thing is there's no such thing as a simple game project.
Yeah.
You always think
That's
there
true.
is, but when you start putting it
It's
on
just
paper,
a deck of cards. What could be simpler?
everything
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
exactly everything
Yeah.
is complicated. And then the other thing that happens, which is a fact of life, and I'm sure that other people can relate to this too if they're listening, is that you start to get a little bit demoralized. Like, really, I have to do all this. I just want to create, and things like the game crafter and these print on demand things are great for being able to finally, to very quickly get a prototype in your hands. I'm learning that if you're going to order hundreds or 1,000 copies of something, it takes so months, 6 months
Yeah.
out. And that's what I'm struggling with now is with the game crafter. I can be so nimble and make changes, then order it. I can even order it urgently if I want, and I can have it next week. There's no way I can do that with a manufacturer. I have to be 100% confident about those things, and then I send them out, and maybe in 4 months I might have it. And
Yeah.
any changes I make in the meantime are gonna, I can't do them. So it's a difficult step in the process. I think probably maybe the most difficult step for a lot of us is
Yeah.
breaking it down and getting it all done and not feeling demoralized. And that's one of the reasons why I created the small batch game publishers group too, because I know there's a lot of people who are going through that right now, and we're not doing things the way we're supposed to be doing these things. And to be able to talk about that, I think, is really important
Yeah.
in this process too. So
Yeah. Absolutely.
So after we get our prototype, we'll kind of rush through these other ones because we're coming up in an hour and a half here. Publication of the game. So you've self-published and you have signed with a publisher. So how does that? If that's we think of that as kind of like a Y. Maybe it's coming down this way. If we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Right.
How does that differ? Are there things that you're doing that are the same, and are there things that you're doing that are different, depending on which way you're going? And can you do both at the same time?
Yeah. I mean, so for me, publishing my own game, the part that I was not great at and still I think have not entirely figured out is the marketing piece. And working with another publisher is nice because that sort of on the one hand that you sort of think of that as their thing to worry about. But the reality is it's still your name on the box and you want it to do well. So there's some expectation that you're going to help this thing build an audience and you're going to help answer questions that people have about the rules or design decisions that you made and just do general promotional stuff. There's a synergy with working with a publisher that I think is
Mm-hmm.
enjoyable. I think it's helpful to have clear communication about what exactly is expected, not necessarily to get into the legalistic aspect of it, but just to understand what is the nature of our relationship with your own thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of what you're going to get out of it is kind of what you're going to put into it, I think. So
Mm-hmm.
it's all on it's all on you for better or for worse. But I think that's one of
Mm-hmm.
the things that I've definitely learned is that as a small publisher, you have to forge all your own relationships, or maybe you've already got some and you can leverage those. But you know, whatever, all reviewers, content creators, people to talk about the
Yeah.
game, people to buy the game, you have to create all of that. And a publisher hopefully has a lot of that infrastructure
Yeah.
already built out.
Yeah.
So it's
There's a reason they
definitely,
get a cut. Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely there still is a benefit to signing with a publisher in
Yeah.
that regard, I guess, is you don't have to create from scratch all of these things, and
Yeah.
hopefully their
I think if
brand
you,
has some of that. Yeah.
yeah, I think it's, Kat asked, how do you decide if a game should be shopped out to publishers or if it's one that you should self publish? So, signing with a publisher last year was eye opening for me because of the length of time. I thought it would be things would happen much quicker, but they didn't because a publisher is
Yeah.
busy with multiple games, right?
Yeah.
So that's something that I thought was interesting. I've liked signing a game with a publisher and working with a developer. I'm working with
Yeah.
Matthew Dunstan actually right now with Battle Dental, and I find that a very useful process. And I think if I had tried to self-publish that game, I wouldn't have thought to engage a developer and really take a closer look at the game. Um, I think the big benefits for me, if I'm in the future, if I'm looking at, okay, here's a game concept, do I want to pitch it or do I want to publish it myself? A lot of it comes down to how much time I have, but the big question is, do I want to oversee the marketing and the development and the art direction of this game? Because those are three big things that over the last year I've learned take a lot of time and a
Yeah.
lot of effort and a lot of organization for me. And if I'm not really excited about the game, I'm going to get burned out doing one of those three things, probably the marketing,
Hmm.
because I just haven't built up that audience yet, and some people have, and that's going to be a really long game that you have to play. So, but also, like you said, with evangelists, sort of doing your first game, you've got a little bit of an audience, you've got a little bit of experience. Every game that you do is going to be easier for you. But yeah, if you're
I
not
think
prepared to
so.
do
Yeah.
marketing and the art direction and the what was the other thing I was saying? Oh, the development of your game. Those are the things that I think a publisher can really come in handy doing. They have the resources and the expertise to do those things. Um, I don't know. That would be my advice: is think about those things and whether they're within your capacity or not.
Yeah, I think the other
And
part is just the economics of the thing, that the reality is
the
some games
economics, right?
just are not producible on a scale of 100 at a reasonable, like my
Mm-hmm.
game sells for $55 full retail. That's at the very upper end of what I would be willing to pay for it, for what it is.
Yeah.
I think it's a great game, but I've really tried very hard to hit a $45 price point, which I thought was the ceiling, and I couldn't. So I think that's an
Yeah.
example of the trade-off is this is a game that actually was shopped around to a few publishers. They said, yeah, this is pretty good. It's kind of a religion game. We just don't think we can see a market for it
Yeah.
at our scale. But
Right.
on the other hand, at the small scale, it means, it's going to be more expensive to produce. So I think that's sort of the trade-off is, can I get a publisher to take this on and actually make it exist because they have the resources to do a bigger run. But then on the flip
Mm-hmm.
side is kind of what is the potential market for this? What's the potential upside for this? And for something like Evangelists, it's kind of a niche thing. That's what a lot of people who are playing it say. Like, this is probably for a particular type of person, but it's great for that particular person. If
Mm-hmm.
this subject interests you, so the publisher doesn't have to acquire um, customers by convincing them this is something you should be interested in. It's already self-selecting
Right.
in
Because
that
they already have
regard.
their market.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's
It
that's
seems
the
to
other
me that
decision
as a
is,
board game publisher, as a publisher, they already exist in a world. They exist with a customer database, and they're attracting more customers like those customers.
right.
And you don't see a lot of people, like when I was working on Battle Dead Tal and working on thinking about self-publishing. I said, well, there's dentist's office all over the place where I could advertise. No board game publisher is going to think about dental organizations or
Yeah.
anything like that.
Right.
But there's a very big homeschool market, and there's a very big
Sure.
religious market that also is enthusiastic about board games, and there probably is a market there that you could tap into, that unless a publisher is already talking about doing board games that center around religion, they might not tap into that market. So
Right.
what is the fit
Exactly.
for it? Because there's probably potential there, but you have to build that audience outside of the board game world.
Yeah.
um yeah. So, assuming that you either are publishing with a publisher or you publish yourself, then there's the evaluations of the game too, right? You get it out into the world. Your job isn't necessarily over. So,
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. You have to support the game. You have to, help. To me, that's really the fun part is just reacting. I just like when people post a picture of the game. It's like, oh, neat. I can sort of
Yeah.
imagine how that particular game state came about, or I can see, oh, this interesting arrangement of cards. That's kind of cool how that came about, or whatever. You told me
Yeah.
what your scores were. Great. Looks like it was a close game. That stuff is just so sad. Of course, you like it when people say, "I loved the game." That's
Right.
great. For my game, we've gotten a couple of reviews that have been really nice. One was written by Dan Thoreau, who has the Space Biff website, and he's a religious studies professor. He's a scholar in this field. Uh, so just the thoughts that he had in the game were in playing the game were very specific to his expertise, and it was just really interesting and enjoyable to hear that. And another reviewer uh, is a teacher at a religious college or something like that. And so, just hearing what other people bring to your game and how that shapes what they get out of it. That is just so much fun, I think. And granted, this is a topical game and a historical one. These guys might think entirely differently about my Vuvuzela game, but but uh, you know, I think that's the enjoyable part, and it sort of helps you to decide. Um, do I want to keep going with this? Do I want to move to something else? Do I want to reprint this? Do
Yeah.
I want to try and license this? These are all the decisions you're making at this stage 9, and sort of gauging what the reaction is. Are people saying, "Yeah, that was fun," or are people saying, "This is so great. This is just great, great, great. I love it." I told all my friends about it. Kind of what is the level of enthusiasm it's generating, because that tells you, should I keep going? You've already
I
paid
keep
for the
going.
art, so it can be a
Yeah.
wise move to keep going with what you're doing. But is that what you want to do? That's the decision you're making here, I think.
Yeah, and that's the beauty about the small batch publishing, and we talked about that with Chris
Yeah, right.
a few weeks ago too. Is like now you can take it further. You can do a second batch like that. Is I think he was talking about what does success look like. Oh, the success is that I sold out, and now I can do a second batch.
Yeah,
I think that's a great goal to have. And like you said, I'm running into that with Bah Humbug too. I'm like, my goal was to produce like 200 copies that I could fulfill by this Christmas. I don't know if I'm going to end up doing that or not. But in the process, I was like, by the time I make 200, I might as well make 1,000 of them,
yeah,
or at least that I can have everything ready that I can press reprint. Is a good goal to have, but I
yeah.
like being able to sort of tie it up with a bow and say, okay, that was enough. I'm done with that too, and I don't have any outstanding stock or responsibilities, um, after that. But I think
Well,
having
yeah.
favorable. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say that to me is the best thing about the small batch model. I mean, look at poor Matt Leacock, and this guy has to crank out a new pandemic game every 2 years. I'm sure he loves doing that, but it's like sometimes a raging success creates more obligations for you than maybe you care
Hmm.
for. Like, oh, we need more content, we need expansions, we need more than just a reprint of this same thing. We want more. We want a sequel game. We want a
Yeah,
prequel
yeah,
game. We want a legacy game. And it's kind of, if you have your game signed by Asmodee, well, you're not going to say no to that. It's like, hey, we can sell 100,000 copies of this thing if you just give us the Acts of the Evangelist 2.0 or whatever, or
hmm,
Bah Humbug, the later
whatever.
chapters in
Yeah,
Scrooge's life or whatever. So that's fine if that's what you want to do, if that's what you enjoy. But I think there's sort of some liberty to the small batch approach, where you can say, I've done what I want to do with this, and I don't care to
yeah,
keep working on it. And you're only hurting at most 100 people's feelings, so it's okay.
yeah.
Yeah,
But it is cool, like things that I sent out a long time ago. So I do. I use Google Forms a lot, and when I'm posting and somebody asks about a game, I say, "Well, I don't have any Kickstarter or whatever, but here's a Google form. Sign up." And I looked back a few weeks ago and discovered that I have like 50 games that people will buy as soon as they're ready. They've just said like, when this is ready, I want to buy it. Like that's a pretty cool thing to be
very
able to
cool.
do, and people are interested
Yeah,
in games that I haven't even been on my radar for months. So I think having those favorable Like you said, having favorable evaluations is important. Having a Board Game Geek page that actually has a rating on it and a picture on it, like that, I don't know, something about that makes it real. And
Yeah.
it also makes it possible that if you decide to release it to a publisher later, a lot of that stuff is already in the works, and it kind of speaks for your games and helps elevate you, the designer. So very cool.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, so we made it through all 9. I always say I want to keep these things to an hour. They're never going to be an hour. I think they're an hour and a half. Thank you so much, Jeff, for joining us tonight and sharing a little bit of your knowledge. Let's keep the conversation going. Everybody who is not already, please feel free to join the Small Batch Publishing group on Facebook and keep the conversation going. This will post live, or not live, after recording up on YouTube. I usually try to put the timestamps in so people can watch it at double speed and skip through to the parts that they want to
Nice.
read, because I know that's how I digest stuff on YouTube. But I hope everybody has enjoyed themselves. David says thanks. And tune in a few weeks. We'll be talking with Bez from Stuff by Bez. We'll be talking with JT from the Game Crafter, and lots of great questions and conversations happening in the meantime. So thanks everybody for watching, and I guess I will play you our little small free games buzz video and sign off for the night. Thanks everyone. Bye bye.